Great games in the morning. This is Jonathan Albin, and this is NycosRPG, and this is the Game Master Soapbox. I'm going to be changing up our format a little bit today. If you notice, I don't have my traditional big list of items on the screen here, and that's because I want to talk about each of my points separately, and I want to get them confused. So we are going to be answering the question: Are we the bad guys? It seems like every games group I've ever had, about 4 or 5 adventures in, they do something that they think is a little suspect or a little edgy, and then they are concerned about whether or not maybe they have become the villains of the story. And sometimes there's a reason to think that way. But when a company, when a team asks that question, you should really heed it because it means that there's something going on that might be behind the scenes that you might need to take care of. So let's talk about these one at a time, shall we? Blah. First of all, first question when they ask are bad guys, are we the bad guys? Ask them if they're the bad guys. They ask you, you ask them, because bad guys are bad. We don't. When you are doing an adventuring game, adventure stories are traditionally supposed to be uplifting, positive tales of the adventures of a party of players on their way from zero to hero. They're supposed to be progressing and advancing down a course to become the heroes of the story. If they are considering or think that they are on the wrong path or think they might be headed towards being a life of villainy, then yeah, find out what their intent is, because bad guys are bad. You don't want that. And this, I also ask them when they're assessing other groups to see whether or not the other groups are bad. Ask the same kind of questions as we're going to go over here, because if you have an idea of who the bad guys could be, and you know the bad guys are bad, you can kind of figure out where the story is intended to go or what the villain is up to. The next one is the bad guys clearly do bad things. Granted, we know that the idea that Al Capone was a criminal and yet he did great things for the city of Chicago in his time there. This is rather tropic, and to a greater or lesser case, it's always going to be the case that there are opportunities where somebody is doing something that doesn't match their counterculture. But you have to realize that bad guys are going to be doing things that are untoward. Either they are illegal, uh, unhealthy, or fattening, as my grandfather would say. And sometimes the bad guys get away with it. If the situation is the players have taken an action and they're reaping the benefits and they feel almost guilty for what they've done, there's nothing wrong with just additional charity and magnanimity on their part. If they want to go do more, feel free. Bad guys get away with it, and good guys can sometimes redeem themselves when they realize that the mistakes that they've made are mistakes, and you can work through it. And there are opportunities to realize that what benefit you got from the game session, what you derive from it, may feel like a guilty pleasure, but perhaps there's more to the story than the player knows. Also, bad guys tend to make irrational decisions. Now, I'm speaking here of bad guys in stories. Some time ago, there was a long list of things that I would not do if I were an evil emperor. And it was an ongoing list of all the different possible decisions you could make and how you would want to avoid all of the pitfalls and pratfalls of villains in movies. If I was a supervillain, I would not pontificate to my nemesis on my plans. You will never know what my plans are until after they're completed, that kind of thing. And bad guys, though, for the sake of adventure stories, need to actually follow all of those tropes. And that means that some bad guys are going to make irrational decisions and do things that make no sense, and the players can react to it. Now, I'm posting these as they would be if the players were asking me. So, bad guys are bad. Do you feel like you're the bad guys? Bad guys clearly have done bad things. Are the things you've done something that's sketchy? If so, what do you want to do about it? Bad guys sometimes get away with it. Do you feel that you've accomplished something that you shouldn't have, or maybe there's something left to be done? And then finally, bad guys make irrational decisions. Are you guys still following your plan to do all the good things in the world? And if so, then maybe it's not as much of a problem. Bad guys don't ever think they're bad. And the idea that a villain legitimately is villainous to be villainous is Saturday morning cartoons level of goofy. And I suppose some villains are that far along, but generally speaking, bad guys think that what they're accomplishing is the best they can do. Now, notice that the best isn't necessarily doing anybody else any good, but they think they're accomplishing something. Everybody wants to be liked and approved of, and all of that, and even the villains are going to think that they're accomplishing good things along the way. And bad guys can't help themselves. There's no stopping a bad guy who has gone down the slippery slope. If he is a truly villainous character that's worthy of his opposition, they literally, if they've gotten away with it 300 times and could go scot free, or they can make one more attempt to be a bad guy, they're going to be a bad guy. They literally can't stop themselves, and so it's up to the players, therefore, to help them along. So the idea that a group can't be stopped if the players are worried about their actions, maybe what they're talking about is something that is, something that needs to be considered. And the bad guys will justify the point of being a bad guy. The point of being the tropic villain is to right some wrong or correct some error or make up for lost time or something. And they're all going to have their justification. They're going to have their reasons for wanting to fix whatever is happening, because it's not something that they can necessarily stop themselves from doing. Do realize, however, that sometimes bad guys do some good things, and maybe that's what the players are really concerned about, is that they haven't done anything good in a while. Well, they can keep themselves from being bad guys by doing some good deeds, but if they only do some good deeds, then they aren't any better. So it's a matter of really having a very solid understanding of what you're really trying to say. But beating the bad guys is an important point, and that's because to beat the bad guys, you've got to know certain things. You've got to know that what you're doing is right. You have to have backing up of culture and the norms of the area. You've got to have the support of the locals. You've got to have the shouting crowds that show up at the end of the film had better not be waving pitchforks and torches for you. Instead, they should be bringing up bouquets of flowers and large shanks of meat or something to reward you with. So if you conclusively know things, then you can definitely beat the bad guys, because you've got the secret. You've got this the one piece they never wanted to reveal. All of those kind of points. And the idea here for knowing stuff is there's an agenda. There's a tilting point. There's a stopping point. And if you, as the players, have figured this out, it means you have the angle to stop the bad guys. But notice this: the players become the bad guys when they decide to do so. And players all the way through may do things that are sketchy, but those are relevant points for discussion about compensation and redressing wrongs and addressing conflicts. The point here is that it's the player's duty and obligation is to become the good guys, but if they make the angle choice and decide to become the bad guys, then they need to be treated as such, and the opposition should be severe, swift, and absolute, literally because somebody in the good guy's side is going to know something about those players. So this little elemental discussion we just talked about is fundamentally the way you look at villains and bad guys. And so if you are a game master and you're wanting to create your own villain, then you go through this same mantra process as you go through. If I want to build a bad guy, he's going to be a bad guy. Okay, well, if he's a bad guy, what's he doing that's particularly bad? It doesn't have to be now, but what's he going to do in the future that the players are going to be able to respond to? Is he going to get away with it for some period of time? You know, what kind of a framework where is he going to be untouchable and unassailable by the party? He's going to make some crazy decisions. How is that going to impact the players? What level of depravity do you want your campaign to drop into? Do you want to uh, cut him off at the knees, or kind of have to cut his throat, so to speak? Are you wanting the players to? You wanting the bad guy to be in the process of doing good when the players catch him, because optically that might be bad. If he's unable to stop himself, is it mania? Is it a form of insanity? Is it compulsion? Why is it they can't stop themselves? These are the pieces that you as a storyteller bring in and you add in behind the bad guys to give them impetus. You want to show their justification. Why are they doing what they're doing? How did they decide that it was perfectly fine to poison the well water of their farmer next door? Inside joke. And maybe beating the bad guys means you have to develop what the players know about him or how they can find it, and maybe that's the entire adventure, is going to find that secret behind his power that gives them the opportunity to take him down. And doing that, realizing that the bad guys are sometimes going to be the good guys, and it's going to feel reversed, and that's perfectly natural. So by setting up a fluid system where the game bad guys are clearly defined and clearly identifiable, using this spectrum of opportunities, you actually set it up for your players to feel more directly connected to the game, and that will keep them from sliding into being the bad guys. Alrighty, so I had completed this in a record time, another 16 minutes. Woohoo! Normally I would stay on later, but at this moment, let's take a quick look here. I don't have any current viewers on right now, and so I will put this little video up on YouTube as well, and we will call it a night. Remember, we do episodes every night at 9 o'clock and now 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock. We do episode advances on the Soapbox, the Toolbox, and the Session Zero Chronicles. So chock full of information, chock full of new episodes. If you want to know more, definitely check out our Patreon account, patreon.com/Nykos, and you can definitely help us out, and that helps us to stay a daily show, and we can keep everything coming out so there's new information for you every day on how to be a better game master